Anyway, the founder of the Davidian movement, Victor Hotef, wanted to be God's implement and establish the Davidic kingdom in Palestine. Well, Koresh also wanted to be God's tool, and he set up the Davidic kingdom in Jerusalem, at least until 1990. He believed the place of his martyrdom might be in Israel. So he actually thought he was going to die in Israel for everybody's sins, because this guy's crazy. But by 1991, he was convinced that his martyrdom would be in the United States. So instead of Israel, he said the prophecies of Daniel would be fulfilled in Waco, and that the Mount Carmel Center was the Davidic kingdom. I know I've pronounced that both caramel and Carmel. I don't give a fuck. After being exiled to the Palestine camp. Say what, Vic?
The caramel camel?
Yeah. Cigarettes, whatever. So after they were exiled to the Palestine camp, Koresh and his followers, they were just kind of like getting by. They've got like a primitive existence going on. They're basically cavemen like John whenever he didn't have fucking power in his house. Remember that, Vic? He like lived for 3 months without power. I was like, Jesus Christ. Anyway, he does. Well, Broderick lived for like a month without water.
Yeah, well, he's dirty.
Yes, he is.
Mm-hmm.
But despite the displacement, Koresh now enjoyed the loyalty of the majority of the Branch Davidian community. So he's successfully these people is the way I look at it. Again, sorry if you're offended by that, but that's what I think. By late 1987, George Roden's support was like really declining because, again, you got the guy talking about fucking chickens in charge of your congregation. It's not going to go well. So to regain it, and this is the best part of this whole thing, I think, the entire story, especially with Koresh's background. So to regain, support in the cult, he challenged Koresh to a contest to raise the dead. So he went as far as to exhume a corpse to demonstrate his spiritual supremacy. he dug up a corpse, Vic. What's the word, Vic? Grave robbing in Texas is the story of the hour.
That's amazing.
Yes. So what does Koresh do? Koresh wasn't stupid. I know he was Mr. Retardo in school, but like legit, he wasn't stupid. So what does he do? Does he exhume a corpse of his own? Does he participate in this stupidity? No, he doesn't. He doesn't do any of those things. He calls the cops on this guy, which I think is fucking funny. So he calls the cops, and all right, so the cops want like photographs. They want proof of this. They can't just take his word for it. So Koresh took the opportunity to seek criminal prosecution of Roden, so he returns to Mount Carmel Center with 7 armed followers. They're like fucking Rambo, right? They sneak into this compound or this Carmel Center. They're trying to get photographic proof of the crime, allegedly. That's what they say. Well, Koresh's group was caught by Roden, and they have a fucking gunfight in this church. How great is that, Vic? So when the sheriff gets there, Roden had already suffered a minor gunshot wound and was pinned down behind a tree. And as a result of the incident, Koresh and his followers were charged with attempted murder because they fucking outgunned the other team. Well, at the trial, Koresh explained that he went to Mount Carmel Center to uncover evidence of criminal disturbance of a corpse by Roden. Koresh's followers were acquitted, and Koresh's case of mistrial was declared. So Koresh never actually, did any time for this shooting of Roden. Well, in 1989, Roden actually murdered Wayman Dale Adair with an axe blow to the skull after Adair stated his belief that he, Adair, was the true Messiah. This George Roden dude was freaking nuts. You think, like, Koresh was wild? This George Roden dude, he's, like, axe murdering people,
He's crazy, yeah. I like him.
So many good stories from this whole thing. Well, so Roden was judged insane, obviously, and confined to a psychiatric hospital in Big Spring, Texas. And since Roden owed thousands of dollars in unpaid taxes on Mount Carmel Center, Koresh and his followers were able to raise the money and reclaim the property. So Koresh takes over the Branch Davidians officially now. But the funny thing is, Roden continued to harass the Koresh faction by filing legal papers while in prison. And when Koresh and his followers reclaimed Mount Carmel Center, they discovered that tenants who had rented from Roden had left behind a meth laboratory. There's so many fucking a meth lab, bitch.
Wow, what the hell is going on?
But the funny thing is, I know how this story unfolds, but Koresh actually reports it to the police, and asks to have it removed. So Koresh gets the meth lab out of there, and then he takes over Mount Carmel. Well, on May 15th, 1990, David Koresh, Vernon Howell, finally files a petition in California State Superior Court in Pomona to change his name for publicity and business purposes to David Koresh. By the way, not sure if they're still there, but there are business cards for David Koresh's music venture on eBay, $45 a pop.
Nice,
like
nice.
The real thing. Yeah. So any of you, what do they call it, Vic? What are they? Murder?
Mm-hmm.
People who collect murder, huh? Murderabilia people. Mm-hmm. There you go. Get it? Well, Koresh, by the way, is the biblical name of Cyrus the Great, who I mentioned earlier, a Persian king who was named the Messiah for freeing Jews during the Babylonian captivity. His first name, David, symbolized the lineage directly to the biblical King David. I don't know how I'm able to read this well. This is amazing, because I've been drinking. From whom the new Messiah would descend. By taking the name of David Koresh, he was professing himself to be the spiritual descendant of King David, a messianic figure carrying out a divinely commissioned errand. Well, let's go back to child abuse, shall we? Why not? Koresh was actually alleged to be involved in unproven multiple incidents of child abuse and sexual abuse. Koresh's doctrine of the House of David did lead to quote-unquote marriages with both married and single women in the group, purportedly with at least one underage girl. There's lots of stories of him sleeping with like 12-year-olds and at least one of an 11-year-old. Now, whether you choose to believe it or not is up to you. I kind of do. He married a 14-year-old, taking people's wives. Obviously, he was a sick pervert. Pretty sure he was a pedophile. Anyway, the underage girl was Michelle. Yeah, it just seems obvious, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
So the underage girl was Michelle Jones, the younger sister of Koresh's legal wife, Rachel, and the daughter of lifelong Branch Davidians Perry and Marybelle Jones. And Koresh allegedly had sex with Michelle when she was 13, evidently with the consent of the Joneses. So I want to get into something. Look, David Koresh, in my opinion, is a piece of shit. But, what is wrong with these parents? Seriously? You know what I'm saying? Like, what the fuck? This dude was like over 30 by this age, and they're just cool with it. They're like, oh, that's fine. Can you imagine? Seriously. What the fuck's wrong with these people? Idiots.
They're dumb?
I mean, I guess they're like, they're grown-ass people. So, I guess things in Texas are just a little different. I don't know. Everything's bigger in Texas, including, except for the age of consent, apparently. Jesus Christ. Well, a 6-month investigation of child abuse allegations by the Texas Child Protection Services in 1992 failed to turn up any evidence. Because, number one, how do you actually find evidence of that? Unless somebody's willing to talk, there's no evidence. Possibly because the Branch Davidians concealed the spiritual marriage of Koresh to Michelle Jones, assigning a surrogate husband, which was David Thibodeau, to the girl for the sake of appearances. Wonderful. Well, regarding the allegations of child abuse, the evidence is less sure. In one widely reported incident, ex-members claimed that Koresh became irritated with the cries of his son Cyrus, spanked the child severely for several minutes on 3 consecutive visits to the child's bedroom. In a second report, a man involved in a custody battle visited Mount Carmel Center and claimed to have seen the beating of a young boy with a stick. I don't know. Again, this is all reports. Whether it was true or not, I don't know. I will tell you this. When you see David Koresh with his kids in those videos that he sent out, experts did claim that those kids look scared. I don't really get that myself because I'm not an expert, but if they're saying that, then I'll believe it.
Yeah.
Of course, if they're stuck in a building for 51 days, I'm sure they are. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Well, let's begin the siege now. We'll get back to maybe the child abuse stuff later, but the siege, again, I talked about this earlier, began on February 28, 1993, when the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, that's the ATF, raided Mount Carmel Center. Now, this is the first of, like, a lot of controversial things that happened. And, Blake, this is when we'll really get involved with maybe some opinions on this. The ATF were fuck-ups. I'm not saying that this whole thing wasn't warranted, that they didn't need to take down the Branch Davidians, that Koresh didn't need to go down. But this whole thing was planned horribly. Get in here, Blake. Give me some thoughts, buddy, on this first day of the siege.
I'm sorry, Travis. Would you say that again?
I said, get in here and give me some thoughts on the first day of the siege, where the ATF had just, well, you know, I sat here and I said that, you know, I think they were right to try to take down Koresh, but their fucking planning was horrible.
Yeah, I don't know. The first, okay, so let me just say, the idea of the tear gas, I talked about
well,
this.
That's day 51. That's day 51, but we're on the first
right,
day.
But I mean, what I'm saying is, if you're thinking, I mean, if you look at everything, I just think that the whole thing from the very, very beginning was not planned out as properly as it should have been. You know, I mean, going through every day.
You didn't think it was a good idea to have you didn't think it was a good idea to have like 40-year-olds you know, camp out like in a shed across the street from the compound and say that they're students? You don't think that was a good idea?
Man, the whole thing is just nuts. The whole situation. There's so much, and I don't know. Are you guys familiar? Speaking of that whole thing in the, you know, across the street, you know, in like a shed or something. Was there ever a movie made about this situation?
About Waco?
Yeah, I swear there was when I was a kid that aired on like Lifetime or something like that.
It was shitty, but there's also a TV show that aired. It was like a mini series that aired a couple years ago, and supposedly it was really good. But the way they didn't really, I don't know. It sounded like to me that they didn't portray Koresh as. They kind of made it sound like he was an innocent victim, and I think that's horseshit. But that's just me.
Yeah, that was not a good way to paint him. I mean, he wasn't innocent. He wasn't innocent.
No, a bunch of the people there absolutely were innocent.
You know?
Yes, yeah. I mean, there were a lot of innocent people who lost their lives in this whole thing, but to say that Koresh was innocent, no. But, I mean, anytime the government's involved in something, though, there's going to be that type of controversy, especially when the government fucks up so badly. And clearly they did. I mean, I'm not disputing that fact at all. The ATF, I think this whole thing, the Waco siege, the way it started, I think the reason why they did it the way they did it was because they wanted the publicity from doing it, from doing the siege, because the press already knew about it. Supposedly, the press were looking for the compound, told a post officer that, you know, they couldn't find the place, and it basically tipped them off. So Koresh and the Branch Davidians knew they were coming. They knew that they were on their way. And Koresh even told the guy that they had on the inside, what was his name, Robert Rodriguez. He was an undercover guy there in the compound. Anyway, he told the guy that he knew they were coming, and so the guy goes back to the ATF and he says, "We can't do this today. They know we're coming. It's going to end bad." And they're like, "No, the fucking press is here. Let's go do it." And so they do, right? And how does it work out? 4 ATF agents dead. You know, you get multiple Branch Davidians dead that first day. Koresh gets shot. definitely in the side he got shot, because that's the wound he shows. He said he got shot in the wrist. I never saw that, but supposedly he got shot in the wrist. But that first day was just wild as hell.